I had quite a surprise when I tested my cognitive functions, because I found that while my introverted intuition was my highest score, my introverted thinking was just a bit lower. My introverted thinking score would match that of an ESTP or an ENTP. The INTP or ISTP would rate higher, but not much higher, and they both lead with introverted thinking. There's no place on the personality tree for someone who has a total 145 for combined thinking scores. If you tossed out introversion and extroversion and just took combined scores for each of the functions in my stack, it would go thinking 145, intuition 130, sensing 85, and feeling 55. The types that have thinking, intuition, sensing, and feeling in that order, disregarding introversion and extroversion, are INTP and ENTJ. However, this is quite unorthodox. Imagine that, an INTJ doing something unorthodox. The one completely consistent thing I have found on the tests I have taken is that I am way deep into the introverted camp. The Big Five gives me 0% extroversion. There's no possible way that I'm leading with anything extroverted. And so the ENTP is completely impossible. Now I have INTP almost covered in TI, and I have it fully covered in SI, but my introverted intuition is 90, clearly higher than my TI score of 80, and the extroverted intuition is less than half of my introverted intuition score. Once again, I am forced to accept the fact that my scores cover the INTJ function stack completely, even though the INTJ stack doesn't cover my scores completely. Combining very strong introverted intuition with strong introverted thinking makes me odd man out. Here's my theory why my introverted thinking score is so high. I have yet to come up with a good theory as to why my introverted sensing score is so large, but I'm working on it. From 1973 onward, my profession was as an electronics technician, and part of the time I was also a technical instructor. The introverted thinker has a deep understanding of systems and the way things work together. When troubleshooting electronic systems, this part of my brain was very well exercised. When I was teaching, I had to know the system I was subject matter expert on from top to bottom. I not only had to know how the system worked, I had to teach others how to troubleshoot the system. And, as if that were not enough, if the equipment went hard down unexpectedly, and trust me, students can insert problems accidentally that are quite challenging at times, I was the go-to guy to get it back up and running so the students didn't miss training time. In between classes, any problems that came up had to be taken care of before the start of the next class. Where it really was high pressure was when I would travel to a customer site to give training. If a machine went down during class, that machine was still going to be used for production when the class was finished for the day. I could not leave a customer machine down overnight, so it had to be fixed. In the Navy, it was quite possible to get an impatient, high-ranking officer looking over your shoulder as you worked on a critical piece of gear that was down. Should your ship be in battle conditions, that notches it way up high on the pucker scale, when your radar or communications equipment is the link that could save your ship. Working on the scopes that air traffic controllers used was another job that was critical to safety for others. When I worked on CAT scans, it was another job that simply would not tolerate poor results. Knowing the system deeply, and from that, knowing what the symptoms would be should a part of the system fail, is all connected with introverted thinking. Diving in to fix it was where I was in my extroverted thinking wheelhouse. Checking switches, looking for loose cables, indicator light, and software error messages, all were taken in quickly, and they often solved the problem. A surprising number of times, I have seen something that was reported as being down, and it was either unplugged or turned off. This is where extroverted thinking is going to nail the problem quickly. My name is Al, and I am an introvert. Sounds like the introduction of an Introverts Anonymous meeting. Being an introvert, my first step when approaching a job is to exhaustively search for information about the job and whatever will help me to do it well. One of the reasons for this is that if I do my job well, I have to spend less time explaining or discussing it with other people. If I can handle the job on my own, then it's done. That's the driving force. As an instructor in the Navy, the first thing I did was to read the Navy technical manuals from cover to cover for each of the modules in the system I was going to teach. As an instructor for ion implanter maintenance, I read everything I could lay my hands on, and I was very unhappy that they didn't document their equipment to the same level the Navy had. But on the upside, I was teaching in the factory, and I could go to the engineers who designed the circuits and the software, and if need be, I could go to one of the 2 resident physicists and ask them what was going on in the machine. My first approach to anything new is to scuff up the new shine and make it a comfortable fit. I want to know what I am doing before I dive in. My wife is just the opposite. She tosses manuals in the corner and just dives in to use things, no matter how long it takes to figure out. It works for her, and she laughs at me sitting there reading the manual. So when it comes down to it, I can't say that I'm surprised at my thinking scores. I have always thought about everything. I want to understand everything and how it works. At the same time, I have always done well with fixing things on the spot with my extroverted thinking. After all these years of working both types of thinking so hard in my job, it seems logical to me that they both would be strong today, as they are. The place today where my intuition is running free is in my novels. When I am writing, it flows from deep inside my intuition, where characters seem to be acting on their own, and I just write it down. That is not thinking, as I do with electronics. Sure, I have to create the drives for the starships and the brains for the androids, but the people, that part is magical to me. These are people I care about, and they only exist in my own mind, and on paper, in my books, of course. When it comes down to it, perhaps the greatest benefit that the MBTI has given to me is the validation of who I have been all my life. A reader, a thinker, a visionary, and a loner. Why did I love working as a field service engineer? Because it is a lone wolf job. I went to a customer's site, the machine was down, and I fixed it. I usually worked alone, and I was in charge of my own results. I had the load on my shoulders. It was my load, and I happily carried it. I thrived in that environment, and now I know why. I am an introvert. I am intuitive. I am a thinker, and I make my decisions based upon judging the facts and reality without worrying about feelings. It is who I am. I am an INTJ. It is okay to be alone and not be lonely. Welcome to my island.